In the previous video, Bang Hee arrived at her office and found a gift on her desk. When the woman opened the box, there was a pair of shoes that she was admiring in a store window and a message from the real culprit of the crime she was accused of. I'm Nina and today's recap will be Suspicious Partner. Ji-wook calls the protagonist at the right time, and she tells him she is scared about what she found on the table. Bang Hee also comments that she believes the culprit is still in her office. As soon as the woman says these words, the man walks out into the hallway, and she follows. Even though she walked as fast as she could to catch up to him, as soon as he went out into the street, she blended in among the people, and the protagonist lost sight of him. Ji-wook arrives next. He's worried if the lawyer was hurt or something. Soon the two go up to her office, and Ji-wook calls Eun-ho, the man who worked with him when he was a prosecutor, so he can help them and send a forensic team the next day. Ji-wook ends up learning about the situation. Bang Hee finds herself in the woman can't find a job, as everyone sees her as guilty of the death of the chief prosecutor's son. And Ji-wook knows that, in part, the man is involved in making this happen. Ji-wook offers her a ride to her house. However, the office is where she lives, and as it has become dangerous, the man offers his residence for her to stay at for a while until things improve. Ji-wook promises that they will catch the person responsible for the crime together. The next day, we see the protagonist in her office with the man who was sent to see if he could find anything or any DNA that could help them in the investigation. And we discover that he is the real culprit, but because of his disguise, Bang Hee doesn't even suspect it. The man managed to recover something that fell from his keychain that was left behind the night before and then notifies the protagonist that he has completed the investigations looking for evidence. In the next scene, we see Ji-wook going to the chief prosecutor's office. The man says that he knows that Moo-young sent people to watch the protagonist, as he has noticed official government cars parked in the places where she is several times. Ji-wook wants to know if he can get footage from the vehicle's cameras so he can find out what the criminal's face looks like, but Moo-young says there are no cameras in their cars. The man wants to know the reason for Ji-wook's interest in the case again, and in the end, the two end up arguing, as the lawyer doesn't think it's right about the evidence that was forged or that Moo-young is burning the protagonist in his profession. Unfortunately, the man also ends up making this happen to Ji-wook. Now that he knows that he is helping Bang Hee, the man asks for a rumor to be created, where it is said that Ji-wook made him furious, and so every time a lawyer at the firm where he works loses, they will blame him. Later, Ji-wook goes out drinking with Eun-ho and starts to think about how he feels about the protagonist. Despite having had peaceful days in these 2 years without talking to each other, the man likes to have his space invaded by her. As soon as he arrives home, Ji-wook comes across Bang Hee in front of his residence with his bags to stay for a few more days, and the man ends up sneaking up on her, who, as he didn't have a visa, gets scared when he notices and twists his foot. The two go inside, and Ji-wook ends up falling asleep while applying an ice pack to the protagonist's foot. We see that the man ends up dreaming about the day he lost his father. Earlier, Moo-young said something to think about, that he thought Ji-wook would be different from his father and that the two were wrong in pointing out an error by the prosecutor, thinking they would be doing justice. Ji-wook was a little boy when the place started to catch fire, and his father was powerless in the middle of the flames. A man appears at the scene, but we can't identify who it is because his face is blurred. The next day, Bang Hee is in a coffee shop looking for ads for places to rent so as not to continue being a burden to Ji-wook. Inside the establishment, men notice that when a woman who was working there gets up, they go to her table to take her belongings, such as a notebook, etc. Yoo-young knew that they were not the owners of the objects, so he decided to intervene, and because he knew self-defense, he was finishing off the men. The protagonist outside noticed the movement and decided to help, as she has a black belt in martial arts, and so the two detained the men until the police arrived. And unfortunately, in this game, Bang Hee ended up hurting her ankle, so Yoo-young takes her to the hospital since the woman helped her with the mess. Yoo-young is a prosecutor and says that she enjoyed meeting the protagonist, so the two decide to exchange their business cards that contain their information. Bang Hee goes to Ji-wook's house to put his foot up since he's in a cast and can't force him around. At the residence, the man takes very good care of her because he thinks he was the one who caused the twist the previous day, and as the protagonist has a crush on him, he didn't even tell him the truth, he just took advantage of it. In the next scene, we see Yoo-young having lunch with Ji-hae, who tells her that the prosecutor has always been an inspiration to her, until Ji-hae decided to attend the same school and college that the woman graduated from. Ji-hae comments on the time Yoo-young was out of the country, and Yoo-young explains that she wasn't in the US to do her master's degree as everyone thinks, but because she cheated on her boyfriend, in this case Ji-wook. And Ji-hae reveals that she was also part of a betrayal. She was the one who was at the hotel with Hee-jun that day when the protagonist discovered her ex-boyfriend's betrayal. Yoo-young says she came back to get her ex-boyfriend back. Her plan is to find him and pretend she doesn't remember why they broke up. In Young-hee's office, exactly what the chief prosecutor wanted is happening. All the lawyers who lose in trials are blaming Ji-wook. So Young-hee asks the man and Eun-hyuk to go out for a drink and hang out with their co-workers, so that they can create a bond and reduce some of the tension in the office. The protagonist arrives at the place after a certain moment, however, to sit at another table, as she is about to get a job, and the interviewers ask for a less formal interview. Ji-wook finds it strange that the woman is drinking with these men she just met, especially since the interview is taking place inside a bar. However, women cannot afford to wait for a better opportunity to appear, as they are at rock bottom. But as the night progresses, Bong-hee realizes that her interview wasn't for a lawyer at the office. In fact, the men want her to visit clients in penitentiaries. They even ask her to wear lower cut and shorter clothes. The protagonist feels disrespected and starts to get angry. However, before she does something she regrets in the future, Ji-wook stands up and takes her out of the establishment. The man is a little tall, and we see that he wakes up the next day in his bed, but wearing only the bottom half. Ji-wook doesn't remember all the things that happened the night before. There are only loose memories in his memory, and one of them is him hitting on the protagonist on his bed. The man even asks Bong-hee if they did something, but since he left her in doubt last time and didn't answer her, the woman does the same thing this time. When the two are leaving the house, they come across Yoo-young waiting for Ji-wook at the gate. From the way the man froze in front of the woman, the protagonist knew that it was her ex-girlfriend. Yoo-young acts as if she wasn't the one who was wrong in their relationship and has the audacity to tell Ji-wook that he will later regret treating her so coldly. Bong-hee doesn't know exactly what to do, but follows the line of reasoning that the man used with her when she was being harassed by her ex-boyfriend and approaches him, pretending to be Ji-wook's current date. The protagonist's plan kind of worked, and Yoo-young believes that she is Ji-wook's girlfriend. In the next scene, we see that the man responsible for the crime that Bong-hee was found guilty of attacks again, and this time there is a witness. At the office, it's Young-hee's birthday, and next to the man's gift, Ji-wook delivers a letter resigning. At night, the protagonist asks Ji-wook why he and Yoo-young separated, and the woman discovers that Yoo-young cheated on him. One day, the man went to visit, and when she entered the residence, she was with another individual in the room. The next day, Bong-hee meets with the criminal to get the results of the forensic investigation he had done in her office, and when they are leaving, the man offers her a ride. The protagonist ends up accepting, but before getting into the car, Ji-wook appears and says he will take her home. In the next scene, we see that Bong-hee vacated his office and went shopping at the market to make up for the stay that Ji-wook was giving him. The man decided to hand in another letter of resignation and decided that he would open his own office. He even let Eun-ho know that he wanted him as manager. And he goes after the protagonist to recruit her as a lawyer. At first glance, Bong-hee does not accept the proposal, as she feels she is abusing Ji-wook's kindness. However, she soon backs down, and when she leaves the art academy for martial arts, which was the way she was getting money, the man is waiting for her because he knew she would accept. Well, Young-hee decided to leave the office where he coordinated and come work with Ji-wook. We have Eun-ho as a manager and Bong-hee as a lawyer. The only one who doesn't have a position is Eun-hyuk. So the man waits for Ji-wook to go out for a run at night and waits for him outside the gate. It seems that the two have unfinished business, and that must be why Ji-wook can't stand him. However, before they can settle things, they end up getting involved in a fight with teenagers who were throwing cigarettes on the ground. The two are beaten by young people and thrown onto the sidewalk cordon. Eun-hyuk opens his heart to Ji-wook. The man reveals that he liked Yoo-young when they were younger, and on the day he planned to declare himself to her, he caught the girl doing the same to Ji-wook, so Eun-hyuk thought he would be able to forget her, but over time the feeling didn't diminish, and he ended up betraying their friendship when he got involved with the woman while she was with his best friend. We then discovered that it was Eun-hyuk who was getting dressed in the room when Ji-wook entered the residence and found out about the betrayal. Eun-hyuk says that he thought about it all this time and that there is no way to apologize to him. Ji-wook also can't forgive him for what he did. The situation becomes more difficult because Eun-hyuk and Yoo-young were the only friends Ji-wook had. They were the ones who supported him since he was little and lost his father. In the end, Eun-hyuk ends up joining Ji-wook's law firm. The next day, the man calls the protagonist to talk and asks her not to hate too much for what she did to her friend. Eun-hyuk explains that he keeps making jokes and laughing because it is one of the ways he finds ways to get closer to Ji-wook. And when Ji-wook sees the two laughing and talking, he takes a hose and starts to wet them. In the next scene, we see that Bong-hee's mother finally got a job. The woman worked as a masseuse, but her wrists hurt a lot because of her years in the profession, so Young-soon had to look for another job. And the one who ended up hiring her was Ji-wook's mother. The woman has an establishment and hired Young-soon with the intention of getting revenge for the woman not having served her more in her last days as a masseuse. Now we move on to the person responsible for the crime that Bong-hee was found guilty of. The man is thinking about the question that the woman asked him about what leads a person to commit this crime. And his response while alone is revenge for certain women, a reasonable punishment. We return to the recent crime scene where a famous chef lost his life. When a woman arrived at the scene, she knew about his movement with something because she wanted to turn off what was on TV, and on the board with his photo she had written in blood in Deuteronomy 22:25, a book of the Bible, where she says, "But if it was in the field that the man forced himself on the girl, then only he will be killed. Don't do anything to the girl, because she doesn't deserve death." Her case is like that of a man who is killed by another. The victim is not to blame for the crime. The woman tried to erase what was written and decided to make a mess of the house to insinuate that the crime happened as a result of a robbery. We now see the man who was accused as the main suspect in the case, the witness who had seen the real person responsible that day, telling the police that he believed the package delivery man was the perpetrator of the crime, and he was arrested to go to trial in a matter of days. The prosecutor in his case will be Yoo-young, and the man chose the protagonist and Ji-wook as his lawyers, as the man believes that only someone who has been through his situation could defend him correctly in court. Ji-wook isn't very confident that he could be innocent, as the man has nothing to prove his alibi, and Bong-hee reminds him that it was the same thing at the time she was accused. Later, the protagonist still hadn't realized that today would be Hee-jun's birthday and paid a dear price for being on the street at night. The man's father went to a cake shop to buy a cake for his son, who was no longer in his midst, and when he saw Bong-hee outside, he immediately went towards her. The man was arrogant as always and ended up crossing the line of what was acceptable when he put his hands around the protagonist's neck. After Moo-young releases her, with a trembling voice, Bong-hee says that, as much as he wanted her to be the culprit, it has already been proven that it is not the woman, and the man responds that he will only leave her alone when the protagonist takes the real perpetrator of the crime for him. When Bong-hee arrived home, Ji-wook noticed that there was something strange about her, besides the scarf wrapped around her neck. So the man decides to go to the protagonist's room and says, after seeing the marks on her skin, that if she wants to talk, he will be there. The work continued the next day. Ji-wook points out that it is strange that the thief used the murder weapon so many times on the victim and that she is still missing. Everything points to it not being a robbery. At the trial, Ji-wook gives a very good defense, saying that the stolen objects were not located in the defendant's house, nor at his work, nor was there any movement in his account. Therefore, there would be no reason for him to be accused of this crime since there is no evidence linking him to the scene apart from that witness. As they leave the courtroom, Bang Hee is confident that they will win the case, and the two come across Yu Young staggering to her car. Ji Wook is worried about the woman wanting to drive in these conditions and offers to take her to her destination. Meanwhile, the protagonist went to the house with Eun Hyuk, who was also there. We see that Yu Young wanted Ji Wook to come into her house to talk, and then it cuts to Bang Hee anxiously at the man's house waiting for him. Later, the protagonist wonders if he will return to the residence, and as soon as Ji Wook appears, she runs to hug him. In the heat of the moment, Bang Hee ends up blurting out that she likes him. However, Ji Wook responds that she is not supposed to fall in love with him. What did you think of these episodes? I hope you liked the summary. Leave your suggestions in the comments and subscribe. If you liked the video, like and share to help me. Until next time.